Of course, always praying for all of our hostages. Okay, guys, I can't believe this is our last class of the season. Just the season. Tammy sent me this morning, chazak, v'nit chazek. But I said, like, we didn't really, it's not the completion. Last year at this time, we actually had finished the 5 books. Yeah. We made a siyum. So now it's not like the completion, it's just like a little bit of a pause. But as we know, Torah learning never pauses, and we'll continue in our own way, shape, and form. I mapped out some of the dates for the summer. They're a little less than I would have liked, but we're trying to work out something special for everybody.
What is it going to be about? You doing a book again?
So Rachel and I are in the middle of brainstorming. My dates are very choppy over July and August. June, I'm still here. So I would imagine that June is probably going to be a 3-part series with a topic, and then possibly we're going to do some sort of book over this summer that will just similar to what we did last year, which kind of just kept everybody involved. And so we're trying to work it through. Yeah, we're trying to figure this out. Okay, so we had Lag BaOmer last week, and we discussed Lag BaOmer. And this is our last class. We're on the 37th day, I believe. Today's the 37th day of the Omer. So we're really almost at the end, climbing this mountain. And so I said that today would really be a class about Shavuos. Shavuos, which really speaks about the idea of commitment, as we've discussed, this whole concept of, like we learned in the book of Strive from Truth, that, you know, God can give, but if we don't receive, then there's a piece that's missing. So we're going to understand, I want to go through a few different points over here that I think will be beautiful for us to just kind of think about as we're approaching Shavuos, and certainly on Shavuos itself. Of course, as we approach any holiday, I will always say this from here till the end of time, that it is so important to remember that when we go through holidays, it is not just a celebration. It is a reliving. It is a reliving of the energy that happens at that time. There is something that we need to actually take a part in and activate, because it's there. It's not just like we celebrate. Celebrate is one thing, but to relive and to activate is really the whole idea. Okay, so for the first thing that I want to talk about is really this idea of, if you think about the whole time period, when we think about Shavuos, you're really talking about the longest holiday in the calendar. Because if you think about it, you have like the 2 bookends. You have Pesach, the first night, and then you have Shavuos, which means that something is very much connected with a Lag BaOmer in there that's like, you know, kind of more towards the end. So the first thing that we just have to remember in order to just set the tone and the stage for all the material that we're going to go through today is just, what is the connection? What is this idea of starting with Pesach, which is the celebration and our freedom and the liberty, and celebrating with the culmination of being given the Torah? What is the connection?
Preparing ourselves, going from like the slave mentality to preparing ourselves to be in spiritual condition to receive the Torah.
Okay, good. That's definitely a piece of it.
You need time.
What do you mean?
From slavery.
Right.
Okay. And what is supposed to be, what is, this is something that we've mentioned before, but just to remind you, what is supposed to be the overarching idea of this connection of the recommitment, or the commitment for the first time from slavery? It's the whole idea of, if we don't have something to ground us to, then perhaps we are still slaves, right? Which is very, for some people, like even just that idea is just so, like, what does that even mean? But understanding that in order to define what true freedom is, we cannot make a mistake in thinking that it's, you know, leaving something behind. It's actually always thinking about working towards something. Whenever we're working towards something, that's actually the definition of true freedom, which I think in and of itself, we have to let that sink in, right? Because sometimes, and especially in today's culture and society, we tend to think like, the less things, the more I can do, the less I have boundaries, the more freedom I have. And the truth is that it really can't be farther from the truth. The more spiritual, the more committed, the more we're working towards something, the more free we are. Now, it's interesting. If I were to take somebody, let's just take the example of a marathon runner, okay? So, or somebody training for a triathlon. Anybody here?
No.
Anybody here who could speak to this process?
I ran a half marathon.
Nice.
Happy
Okay,
to-
beautiful. Oh, mazel tov. Would they describe this process as freedom?
No.
No, it's slavery.
It's
It
slavery.
feels like
Exactly.
I'm
slavery.
telling you, my daughter did
It's
like 10 of
slavery.
them.
Your daughter did 10 marathons?
One marathon in New York.
Yeah.
And like 8 of them half marathon.
Okay, and you're saying she would define this whole time period of training as slaves.
In the marathon, I
Uh.
said, no more. I mean,
Yeah,
you see somebody and the marathon,
Effort. That's
Right.
So much.
it's so much effort. But according to the Torah definition of what freedom really means,
It is freedom.
which is not actually
just calling me.
go marathon runner. According to the Torah definition, Sarah, even though you say it's slavery and it's so hard and it's all the things, according to the Torah,
It's freedom.
that would actually be, yeah, who just said it's freedom?
Yeah, me, because you have the freedom to decide if you want to do it. Nobody's pushing you to do it.
Okay, but once you're committed, even take it one step further. But yeah, now you're committed. We're going to talk about that choice in 1 second with that powerful word choice. But once you're committed and then you have to do it, then what?
You don't have, there's never a time that you have to do it. Okay, if that's in your mind, you have to do it for
Exactly.
yourself, just for yourself, if you want to, but you don't have to. That's not-
Exactly.
That's freedom.
Exactly. Which means, yeah.
It's a process, and you get there and then you slip, and you get there and you slip, and you know, even those who left Egypt, we leave our memories behind, you know, of things that, "Ugh, I wish I had brought this," or why didn't we, you know, there's always it's so much process, so
Yeah.
much
And don't forget another thing.
Yeah.
It took them 40 years to get to Israel. So all the generation was slave, not exist anymore.
Mhm.
So then the next generation was really, really free to come to Israel. Before that, none of them came to Israel.
Right. I mean,
Moses.
right. Right.
Yeah.
That's also a point. But okay, so just exactly going back to what Nancy was talking about, it's just a really important thing to recognize. In Hebrew, we called this word bechira, the choice, right? The power to be able to choose. And so essentially what we're saying is that when you are actively making that choice, when you are saying, I am being able to choose this, I have the power, I have the autonomy to be able to make this choice, that is actually what true freedom is. When you do something, I'm going to take it now up one step, okay? When you do something, even though you don't want to do it, you're actually activating more free will than by just choosing to just follow, okay? So what we have to recognize over here is that the Torah is giving us this level of commitment, this idea of structure, this idea of laws, this idea of connection. And we constantly have the ability to choose. Every single second of the day, we're having the ability to choose. And when we choose, even when it feels like this is something that feels like it's working against my nature, that's activating even more of our choice. And that's activating even more of the free will that God has given us. So the reason, and I'm not going to spend too long on this because we've spoken about this in the past, but the reason that Pesach and Shavuos are so connected is because of this reason. To make the question even stronger, you have to recognize that really, if you think about it, on Yom Kippur, when they got their second set of luchos, you could really say like that was really when we should be celebrating the giving of the Torah. Why are we celebrating it on Vav Sivan when we got the Torah, but then the luchos were shattered and we didn't really do anything with it, right? Like it wasn't really until later on in history that we actually were able to get that real set of the tablets. It wasn't until later on in the calendar year, which is Yom Kippur. Okay, so to add fuel to that question, I'll just point out that there's actually debate. It is not clear whether the giving of the Torah happened on the 6th of Sivan or the 7th of Sivan. And to this point, we call this entire time period Ziman Matan Toratenu, the time where we were given the Torah. It's a discrepancy, which we're not 100% sure about, but there is a little bit of a lesson over here. There's a lot of lessons, but what do you think this shows us about the fact that it's not on a specific day? What lesson? It's a little odd, guys, if you think about it. Like the day that we finally got the Torah after this whole journey, and like we don't know if it's the 6th, the 7th. Like it's a little weird.
We're always striving
Mhm.
for what else we're striving for, and there's always the next level. There's always something that we learn from what we didn't quite finish, but we look at each opportunity and we're able to grow from it.
Okay, this is true, but why does that have to be that we're not sure which day it is?
So it's gonna let you think.
Because I think we embrace that it doesn't have to be a specific day and
Right.
time,
Yeah.
because we're always honoring what it is that we honor. And
But-
sometimes, you just said Shlomo lost his aunt and he went to visit, but now he can't go for the funeral because we can't be in all places at the same time.
Right.
From the 50th, I trained and did the Avon 3-day, and there were days that it's pouring out. I'm not going out.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, you have to, because it may rain
Wow.
on the day that I did it. In fact, the 3-day that year was May 6th, 7th, and 8th. And on the 7th, we woke up, I got out of the tent and it was freezing. It had snowed the night before.
Wow.
So we were walking in May in the snow. You can't prepare for everything, but if we're open to it, we prepare for everything.
Okay, beautiful.
And-
Beautiful. Someone on Zoom, that's beautiful. Someone on Zoom wanted to add something?
I did, but I forgot what I was gonna say. Wait a minute. What were we just talking about? What were we-
Amy!
don't know where-
We're talking about the discrepancy between the 6th and the 7th day of
Oh,
the Torah,
right,
why you
right,
don't have to
right.
know.
Hey, I'm one of the older ones, so get used to it, lady. I forget very fast. Okay,
Amy,
so
I miss you.
so this is what I was thinking. It could be something as little as it wasn't written down correctly, or that's how we get all our history from what has been generally written down to tell us our history. No?
Yeah.
Otherwise we wouldn't know these days. Okay, that could be one reason it wasn't written down.
Okay, but the reason, yes, 100%, but there's other things that are not written down. Everything was either verbally given over and then written down, or came to a certain prophet and then written down. At some point, we have all the information. It was written down.
Right. So is this the only thing that's ambiguous generally?
This is definitely the only holiday that's, I mean, listen, Rosh Chodesh, they know based on the moon. This is the only holiday that's like, we're not sure if it was on the 6th or the 7th. Like, that's a little weird. So what's the deeper reason? So Nancy really alluded to it.
Uh-huh.
And she's saying that the purpose of this is to recognize that the giving of the Torah, if it was so defined by one specific date in history, then perhaps we lose sight about what it really means to be living with the Torah, to be alive with the Torah every single second. The discrepancy makes it a little bit more like, you know what? It's kind of irrelevant. It doesn't need to be tied to a certain date because the Torah was given.
Yeah.
And this is our Torah to receive, right? The reason that the Torah was given in a desert, specifically at Mount Sinai, it was a desert, is because it was leveling the playing field. It was making it accessible to all. So it was given in the desert. We don't know specifically exactly which day. It's trying to show us that this has to be something that is all encompassing, all surrounding, all part of every like intricate detail of our whole entire essence. Okay. So I now want to just switch over to a few other important things. And that is that what does it really mean? You know, to dig a little bit deeper, what does it really mean that we have to be receivers of the Torah? What does it mean?
What does it mean?
What does it mean that we have to be receivers of the Torah? Is this an internal conversation? Is this something that we say to God? Is this something we say to our fellow? Is there something we're supposed to read or something we're supposed to do? And to make the question even more intense, every holiday that's telling us you have to do something, as you know, Shavuos has nothing. Shavuos has absolutely no mitzvot connected to the day, right? Passover, you have to connect to what it means to have left Egypt in a rush. You want to connect. It's a mitzvah. You say a blessing on the matzah. You say a blessing on the maror. You have a whole seder, right? Hanukkah, which is a rabbinic one, you light the menorah. Rosh Hashanah, you blow the shofar. Yom Kippur, you fast. Sukkot, you sit in the sukkah. By the way, all those things are mitzvot. They're written about in the Torah. Comes the biggest day, the one that's supposed to be celebrating our entire essence. And there is not a single action that is a mitzvah, that is a mitzvah written in the Torah. So to make it an even bigger question, what does it mean to be able to receive the Torah? What are we supposed to be doing? Like, am I doing it right?
Wearing white.
But that's not a mitzvah.
I know.
Commitment.
And bring
Okay.
the bikurim.
Yes, I know this from Sarah, always talking about this,
Okay,
but that's a traditional
Right.
flavor. To make it even more of a question, right? They had to add in these things like, oh, don't forget to get your cheesecake. Don't forget to make your houses beautiful with flowers. Like they're adding in these feelings because there should be a little bit of like culture and ritual into it, but it's not a mitzvah. And don't get confused. Don't get confused. A mitzvah, hold on. Let me just explain. A mitzvah, there are 613 mitzvot, each one of them connected to a specific sinew or limb or like part of our body, right? They're all connected. A custom, that's just for the flavor, right? It's not really doing anything. It's
So,
nice.
Devora,
Yes.
is it about making the choices to choose these minhagim, to choose these customs? Do I want to eat dairy, or are we going to stay up all night and learn? So they're not, as you said, they're not mitzvot, so they're not like these have-tos. So it's part of the choice of taking on the Torah and making choices all the time.
Okay, I like it. I like the thought process, but we always have the choice, right? Even if the Torah says that make matzah, so you still have the choice. So then throw in the mitzvah at least. Throw in the mitzvah. Yes, and by the way, it was already said. Just hint, it was already said. But yes,
I'm thinking that that it's not one day, but we were given the Torah, and Torah is everything. It is our entire life, our entire year, our.
okay. So if
entire
that's the case,
everything.
then what's the point of Shavuos?
Maybe just a
This
reminder that this is
Thank you, Sarah.
a reminder, maybe every year, that this is us, this is
Okay.
everything.
Okay, good.
Not
So
one specific thing.
So Hatalmidah over here, Sharon said the word, and you're 100% right. Sharon said the word, and this is really the focal point of this class. And that is the idea of commitment with a capital C. In any relationship, if it's starting to go a little bit, south, if it's starting to get stale, there needs to be something that's going to rekindle and respark. I remember what?
reinforced.
To reinforce, and I like to say to rekindle. I remember one specific couple, I will not say their names, but part of our community. And I remember them saying that every year on their anniversary, it's a conversation. This is just their tradition, but it's a conversation for them to literally renew their vows, like to literally say, like, we are choosing in. You have a choice right now. Do you want to leave me? Do you want to leave me? When I heard this for the first time, I like struggled with it a little bit. And now I heard it for the first time many, many years ago. And now I understand the depth of it. They sit down, they go out to dinner together. It's a whole thing. And they actually have this conversation. And every anniversary, they are choosing back in or not. So far, they're still married. Okay. But they're choosing back in. So I thought to myself, what a fabulous parable to what Shavuos really is. Because it's the time when you're really, like Randy said, the Torah and Judaism and all of the mitzvot are supposed to be something that are part of our whole lives. But there is this idea of commitment. And to take it one step further, it's not just about commitment. The Piasetzna Rebbe, if you were at our Chalabik, I spoke about the Piasetzna. Do you remember? The tune that we sang on the guitar, that was called the Piasetzna Niggin. He has brought a tremendous amount of Torah to our world. So he explains that the light, it's not just about the commitment. Another word for commitment could also be renewal. What's so fabulous about renewal? Why is renewal so fabulous?
It's remind you why you are there, why you're in this relationship.
Okay.
And this is the time that Am Israel got married to God.
True. True.
Every year you have to remember why you are there.
Okay.
What is your commitment?
Okay, exactly. So, but renewal, when I think about renewal, fresh.
Right,
When I think about renewal, I think about fresh. There is something that is so invigorating about a fresh. You know why? Because we're human. And life takes its toll. Life takes a beating, and just the daily grind starts to get a little bit bleh. So what happens? So Shavuos comes, and we have this day where it's like, okay, let's take this out. Let's analyze this. Let's look at this. Let's understand, what is this renewal all about? And the PSS that takes it, to quote the PSS, that he says something so beautiful. He says that the light of renewal is not just about to see what the Torah is. The light of renewal is to see, you ready? Who we are.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
You understand? If you're using the day of Shavuos only to look outward, I'm going to say we. If we're using the day of Shavuos to only look outward, we're missing the boat. Because the renewal of Shavuos and the whole concept of the Torah, the whole concept of connection, the whole concept of commitment has so much to do with what's going on deep inside of me. Who am I? And the beautiful part about this is that we all know that we're made of so many different parts. We're so complex. And I can only speak to myself, but sometimes when I goof, when I make mistakes, so we get very hard on ourselves and we tend to be very strong on ourselves, and I get upset with myself and why can't I just da. But the renewal of Shavuos reminds us, hold on one second. I'm a human. I'm a beautiful human. I am a fallible human. And I'm also a strong, competent human that gets knocked down and can stand back up, that gets knocked down and can stand back up. And in understanding this idea of the fact that we are fallible and the fact that we are literally humans, right? That is what makes us the proper vessels to be able to receive the Torah. And I know I say this every year because I just think it's such an important reminder. I think I just was even discussing this with you, but just the idea that when it finally came time for God to give the Torah to Bnei Yisrael, who wanted the Torah?
The angels first.
The angels were begging for the Torah. There was a misunderstanding in heaven that for some reason the angels thought this Torah was going to be given to them. And they're literally, however you want to imagine this scene, but you could just imagine there's this whole heated discussion. The angels are like, what? This is for us. Like, you're not giving this thing. This is way too precious. You're not giving this thing over to human beings. And Moshe Rabbeinu enters the case and says, hold on one second. Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course this is going to humans. And they said, well, yeah, make your case. Make your case. And what is his case? He tells the angels, well, I mean, do you guys speak gossip? Because we speak gossip. We need guidelines. The angels are like, yeah, no, we don't gossip. I mean, do you have lusts? Do you have temptations that you might fall to? No, we don't got no lusts, not us, right? Okay, well then, why do you need do you have parents that you need to honor? Hello, are there humans that you might need to interact with and not embarrass? No, none of these things. Well then, guys, why do you need the Torah? And with that, God says, Moshe Rabbeinu, you won the case. I wasn't there at the time, so I don't know exactly what the nuances were, but this is the way the Midrash explains it. And this is such an important reminder, because when we talk about the light of renewal and we talk about understanding who we are, part of understanding who we are at this time is holding space for the perfectly imperfect humans that we are. And if we can look at ourselves as comes Shavuos and not beat ourselves up, but recognize, hold on, guys, I am trying to climb this ladder. I am trying. And as long as we're constantly trying to climb up the ladder, even though we might fall down a few rungs, Hashem says, you know what? I see where you're at. I see that you're striving. I see that you're trying. And that is what is so, so, so powerful. Now, I'm just going to tie this in for 1 second into the topic that we spoke about last week, okay? Because I think that when we talk about ourselves, you have to realize, like, ourselves and other people, like, it's an interesting thing, right? Like, how we treat other people is different than the way we treat ourselves. And sometimes which one falls first? It's easier to treat which one badly. What do you say?
Ourselves.
It's much easier to treat ourselves badly, right?
Or
It's much easier.
Family or, yeah.
Other people, it's much easier to treat ourselves badly because we're like, we'll deal with it. We'll deal with the spank, you know? So we said last week something very, very interesting. By the way, two things that I just wanted to point out about last week that I realized I didn't say in class. First of all, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who we were discussing last week, I meant to start off with it. He did not go in the cave for 24 years. He went in the cave for 12 years and then 1. Okay, I made that mistake. I called my husband afterwards. I'm like, I feel like I just said the wrong thing. And he's like, oh my gosh, I also said the wrong thing. We both said 12 and 12 for some reason. And we looked it up and it's 12 and 1. Okay, so that's just one small thing. The second thing I just wanted to make very, very clear that I didn't say last week is that, remember I said that 12,000 pairs of students perished. And I said the plague either stopped because it was over or because everybody had died out. What I didn't say is that there were 5 humans that were left, 5 people. And those 5 people had to take all of the Torah that they knew and start the next generation. And one of those people was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Okay, I just didn't make that connection. I realized as soon as I just didn't make that link. So let's just remember that. When we spoke last week about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we spoke all about the power of not being able to see. What the Torah, what the words actually tell us is that Shalom nahagu kavod zeh bazeh, that they did not treat each other with kavod, with respect. Okay, we're not going to focus on that. Now I'm going to add a layer. The word kavod sounds very similar to another Hebrew word. What does it sound like?
Kaved.
Kaved. What does heavy mean?
Oh.
Heavy, it's heavy.
So now put in that word, heavy is heavy. Shalom nahagu, that they did not treat kavod, heavy, zeh bazeh, with each other. So what do you think this is trying to teach us?
Honor, no?
So honor is the simple way of understanding it. I'm going one step further.
To be light.
Or to have some kind of weight, as
To
treating
be
others as you would treat yourself,
Very close. You're getting close. Carry on with the idea of weight.
right?
Yeah.
That you would in a way carry a burden with a friend.
Okay, that's beautiful.
Right.
What?
Carry the weight.
Okay, that's what she also said. No. It's not being able to see the weight
Right.
of the other human. Okay? Meaning, in other words, not being able to fully value what the other person stands for. Okay? So we moved along from that last week, but now I'm going to flip it to us because we're talking about that part of accepting the Torah is knowing who we are and we have to be able to accept. Okay? So what does that mean? If we're not able to see the value in another person,
Value ourselves.
right? And it goes the flip side as well. If we don't see the value in ourselves, it's very, very difficult to see the value in somebody else, right? The people, generally speaking, I'm not saying that there's never an exception to this rule, but the people who are able to see real value, see people with the glass half full, judge people favorably, give people the benefit of the doubt, it's because they themselves are pretty whole. They look at themselves as pretty whole. They're not looking at themselves as a piece of dirt on the ground. They see their value. They understand. So that idea of kavod means that there also has to be something over here inside of ourselves, recognizing our heaviness, our weight, our greatest part. And sometimes that we could do that for somebody else, and sometimes somebody else can do that for us. But inevitably, we need to realize that ultimately it's best to come from ourselves. I'll tell you that the wife of Rabbi Akiva was one who actually did that for Rabbi Akiva. She was actually able to light his own heart so that he was able to value himself, right? When we were in 8th grade, we read that book. It's called And Rachel Was His Wife. And at that time, I just started to understand the magnitude of what this wife did for this individual who barely saw his essence. He barely even understood what he could be. And his wife saw something. She was amazing. She was from the home of Kalba Savua. He was one of the wealthiest, people at all times. And she ended up seeing this guy, this shepherd, Akiva. Kalba Savua is thinking, are you joking? You're going to marry this pauper? Like, this is who you're going to marry? But she saw something in him. And through her belief in him and through her understanding his kaved, his weight, his value, she was able to focus, believe, give that over to the point that then he was able to believe in himself. This is almost like a side point, just because I think that it's important to recognize if we're focusing on Shavuos in accepting ourselves and holding space for our own weight, it's also really important to think about who else's world we can ignite, who else's world we can believe it in. If there's somebody who we feel needs a pick-me-up or somebody who's really struggling, sometimes they're struggling just because they need someone to believe in them. This past Shabbos, we had the tremendous opportunity. For those of you who are friends with me for long enough, you know this school, Ma'ayan Academy in Lakewood, New Jersey. It has a very near and dear place to our heart. So all girls from Orthodox homes, victims of trauma in some way, shape, or form, all victims of trauma. And this woman, Mrs. Katz, started this school for all these girls. We saw it from the very beginning 4 years ago, and now the Shabbos, we hosted 30 of them in our home. It was unbelievable Shabbos, beautiful. One thing that I didn't even want her to leave my house, because just watching her interact with each of these girls, I was thinking to myself, this is all they need. Look at the way she believes in every single one of these students. The way I could see in her eyes, the way she views them. It's like I could just know what's going through her mind. Like, that's all they need more than that. They need a lot of therapy and a lot of help, and she's getting it for them. But to have a principal that literally just sees, like, this is where they're headed, this is where they're going, sometimes that's what we need. So that's a very, very important piece of all of this. Okay, so when we talk about, last week we spoke about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, one of the things that he gave over, we spoke about, was the insides of the Torah, Kabbalah, the Zohar. It's called in Hebrew the Penimiyut HaTorah, the inner of the Torah. In essence, what we're realizing is that he didn't just give it over for the Torah perspective. There was actually a depth within each side of us, the insides of us. When we talk about penimius, it generally is referring to inside. What's really inside? What's the depths? So if we're recognizing this idea of the piasetzna that's giving over, that Kabbalas HaTorah, that receiving the Torah is about understanding and seeing who we are, and then we understand that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who brought all this light of Torah into the world, but it was about the insides of us. It means that this time of year, we're able to access something way deeper about who we are at our core. Now, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to pause for 1 second. I want to ask you a question. How does one know themselves? How does one know themselves? If we're talking about being able to see who we are, hold value for who we are, understand the weight for who we are, accept who we are, love who we are, how do we know who we are?
The process.
Okay. How?
Comes from both your internal understanding and appreciation as well as other people's validation.
Okay, beautiful. Beautiful.
And your connection with the Almighty.
Okay, how?
I guess through prayer, conversation.
Okay.
How do I say that? Dveikut.
Dveikut. Okay, good. Through your connection, maybe you're able to understand. Okay, beautiful.
How you were raised, your family were the first people to help you see your own value.
Okay, true. And for one who doesn't have that?
Yeah.
Right.
You have to either develop it internally,
Right,
or
but in
validation from others.
right.
later.
By the way, the reason in the Torah you see that some of our matriarchs and patriarchs came from rotten foundations is for those people.
Yeah.
To remind them that it doesn't matter. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. Rachel, Leah, they came from Lavan. He was a horrible person. And yet Rachel and Leah. You know, there are four mothers. So yes, but it's true. Our foundations are very much affected. How we're the family that we're born into, the way that we were raised, the values, absolutely. Isn't it? So is there an answer when I ask you, how do you get to know yourself? Is there an answer?
Not one.
If I ask a psychologist, how do I get to know me? What would they tell me? What would they say?
You know the answer.
Okay, journal is actually a very good answer. What?
You know the answer.
They would say, you know the answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go to a silent retreat.
Okay. Get to know yourself. Exactly.
Huh.
So what's so interesting about this is that I love the way that you said, you know, it takes time to get to know yourself, sometimes through experiences. But the one really interesting thing about the Torah and the gift of the Torah is that Torah is not just books. It's not just opening up and reading and learning. Torah is literally a whole life, a whole lifestyle that's very immersive, which to me tells me that as I go through life and as I respond to certain things and as I feel certain things and as I go through certain things and as I feel certain things in my body, I start to understand who I am, right? A little child doesn't have the same understanding of who they are as a person who's more developed, partially, not just because the brain is less developed, partially because they haven't had the experiences, right? They haven't gone through the experiences. So there's something very, very beautiful here. One of the lines that comes to me on Shavuos when we're thinking about this relationship and what it means to accept the Torah, we say in Hallel and we say in the verse of Tehillim, we say, and King David used to say these words all the time. Ki ani avdecha. God, I am your servant. What does a servant represent? Serving. What else? Service. But a servant can only submission. So submission is an interesting word because, but it's that level of commitment.
Right. Mm-hmm.
There's only a servant if there's a master. Okay, so number one is that if we're a servant, we're acknowledging that there's a master. Has anyone ever thought about this line and noticed that word before the word avdecha, before the word your servant? Ani, I, ani,
Right.
I, avdecha, am your servant. Which means if you're thinking about these words, you're essentially saying there can only be a servant if there is an I. Ani avdecha. God, I'm your servant. But if there's no I, if I don't know who I am, if I'm wishy-washy and I'm like all over the place, like a little flailing, piece of wind that gets blown, that hears of this thing and is just blowing all over the place and is not committed, how can we be a servant?
No.
Right. How do we take pleasure in being able to say, God, I am your servant, if there is no commitment? On the holiday of Shavuos, we read the very, very, very magnificent story of the book of Ruth. There is one word that summarizes that entire story, and that is commitment. You could go through the story and you could see 1,000 different ways to understand this beautiful story. At the end of the story, you have to come away with one massive theme, and that is the theme of commitment. Ruth had every opportunity and excuse to be able to say, I'm a Moabite princess. I don't need this. I can carry on with my life. I can build a life for myself. Unfortunately for Nami, she probably will die alone in her bedroom. Nobody will even know that she's dead. But I don't need this. But she was so connected and so committed to what her truth was that it didn't matter. She was able to say, I know, I understand. We learn that every time there's a convert, you're supposed to kind of like dissuade them. Like you're supposed to like show them like we welcome them with open arms, but after we push them back a little bit, after we say to them, you understand that there's a very heavy price tag that this comes along with. Well, they did the same thing to Russ. Her mother-in-law did the exact same thing to her. She was going through all the different laws in the Torah, and they were obscure laws. One of them that's brought down is like, there's a concept on Shabbos that you can't walk. It's called a Tchum Shabbos. You're not supposed to walk so far out of the boundaries of a community that you're just like out in nowhere's land. We're not going to get into the laws of Shabbos. It's even past the Erev idea. It's Tchum Shabbos. You can't walk in the middle of nowhere. So that was one of the things that Nami said to her, and she responds, I will walk wherever you're allowed to walk.
Mm.
Telling her laws about different immoralities, different things you're not allowed to go to, different things you're not allowed to say, all the like obscure and hard parts about life. And to each thing, she responded with, I'm committed. I'm committed. I'm committed. I'm committed. And it was only the strength of her knowing who she really was inside that she was able to recommit to this idea, to be able to say, or even not even recommit, to commit to this idea. That was what was so powerful about the story of Rus. There is one beautiful part of the Torah, a midrash, that speaks about how Moshe Rabbeinu, what was he doing, by the way, for 40 days and nights up there? Anybody know?
He was talking to God.
Doing what?
Like memorizing or taking notes or whatever he needed to do to get all the instructions.
Okay, good. Some kind of massive prophetic, pardon the word, but like massive trip. Some sort of completely out of body, out of consciousness, massive, immersive, full body, full soul, full mind experience. Yeah. Absorbing. Okay. Something that like we have no concept of really understanding what that was for 40 days. He didn't eat and drink for 40 days and nights. What does that even mean? You know, how does a human even, he's human. Hello. What was going on? So one of the really interesting midrashim talks about how for part of the time, the Ibn Ezra, no, it's not a midrash, the Ibn Ezra actually says that part of the time that Moshe was up on Mount Sinai, he wasn't just learning the practical parts of the Torah. Part of it was also where he was actually crying to God. However we want to understand this, he was actually just crying to God. And what we were what the commentaries say on that what was going on, he was crying to God. What does that mean? Is that he was learning to understand the ways how we could actually know ourselves. Because what God actually says is, you know what? I don't just want humans of actions. I want humans of heart. We speak about this a lot in this class. Rahmana liba ba'i. God doesn't want robots. He doesn't want just robotic actions. He wants the heart. And so part of what Moshe Rabbeinu was actually up there learning and experiencing was, well, what does that really mean? What does it mean that God wants my heart? What does it mean that we have to know our souls? What does that understand? And part of this idea is understanding the expansiveness that is inside of every single human. I'm going to just take this now. Let's just bring this idea back. What does this mean from everything that I said so far? What does this mean in terms of our role in receiving the Torah, in being active receivers? What has to happen? Think for a minute.
For me, it's to be good. To be good.
So
To be
simple.
good for yourself, to be good for your neighbor.
Okay, so on Shavuos, we're just supposed to be good? No, this is true, but what does it mean that on Shavuos has to happen?
That we have to know our full value, our full ability, to receive as much as we can for that year,
Okay,
that time.
and our full potential,
right.
our full potential as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
Our heart
good.
has to be,
What other themes, any other, what?
our hearts have to be open.
Okay, so tell me
We have
more
to
about
be-
this.
We have to be completely open to making the commitment and to dealing with the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And to accepting our fallibility, but to be able to see the value in ourselves and in others.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Embrace the potential.
Okay, beautiful.
That's what I'm saying. It's the only way that you can look at that like that is when you're good. When you're bad, you can look at somebody and say, oh, for bad, good doesn't count.
Mm.
And when you open your heart and you're good, so you're expecting people to be good like you.
But it is interesting when we think about when you say good or God wants our hearts. And what does that mean? We're not handing in a pumping heart to God.
to be able to understand the other person, to be positive.
Okay. So there's a lot of definitions of what this means. But what I think I'm trying to get to is understanding that in order to be able to get to this level of recommitment, of the connection, of the renewal, it almost seems to me that the heart has to be a little bit cracked. There's a beautiful Hasidic saying that there's nothing as whole as a broken heart. Right? It's said by some of the Hasidic masters. So I always understood that like a broken heart, like a broken-hearted heart. That was always the way that I understood it. And there's something that's so whole about a shattered heart also. But this idea had a little bit of a different light on that idea. If you think about a cracked heart, you think about a heart that's open, you think about a heart for potential, you think about a heart for expansiveness, you think about a heart that is able to receive. When a heart is like this, quite literally, when a heart is like this and it's not able to be able to receive, is that really the way to be able to commit to something?
I think you have to be vulnerable.
Okay, I was waiting to see if somebody was going to use that word, right? What does that mean?
You have to be willing to admit maybe your failings a little bit and be able to accept your good and your bad
Yeah.
in order to accept somebody else's.
Exactly. And by the way, I do want to just say, like, the focus of this class is much more inner focus. I happen to have mentioned the other piece because we spoke about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the relationship with all of the dying students, and I wanted to tie that into that. But it's much easier to be good and do good for others and to completely be lacking ourselves.
Goes back to what you were talking about earlier, striving towards something.
Right?
When you recognize your weaknesses, you realize there's something that you need to be doing differently
Okay.
to get to a better place as a better
Okay.
person.
So I love the way you just said that, because that was actually when I was thinking about Shavuos, and I was thinking that really ideally each year we're coming a little higher on the rung. We're understanding a little bit more what commitment means, what connection means, you know, and if not, okay, then you went down one year in the rung, and we accept ourselves for that as well. But I love what you're saying, because I think that in order to be able to continue to climb, there needs to be that reckoning. There needs to be that understanding of what that brokenness really looks like, being able to hold space for it, being able to own it, and then being able to say, and what am I going to do with this? So to me, this was a real like eye opener for this year. In thinking about when we're talking about this renewal, and we're talking about this this commitment, you know, along the same lines in that same beautiful paragraph in Hallel, in Tehillim, we say, Ani avdecha, I'm your servant. We also ask God to remove our traps. Pitachta lemosei rai, like get rid of these things that are holding me back. What are those things that are holding us back? Sometimes our beliefs and our mentalities are the biggest stops to our growth. We tell ourselves something over and over and over again, and it's just not helpful. It's not helping us grow in our relationship. It's not helping us come closer to God. Okay? So at the same time, I think there's like two things over here, because at the same time that we're trying to recognize this and hold space for all of this, I just want to go back to this idea and this word of commitment. And that is that we want to show up for God. We want to show up in this relationship, but is there something that we're doing to actually show God and show ourselves that we are committed? Meaning, I was asking myself this question. If we're really so committed, then that would be the front and central theme of so much of our lives. Constant growth, constant striving, constant spirituality, constant boundaries, like we started this class with, right? Like the boundaries are really what make us the most free. But is that really the lifestyle and the life that we're living? So Shavuos is really a time to kind of like really analyze that, to really look at that, to really hold space for that, to look at like a download on, hold on one second, like if I could do a spiritual biopsy on my heart, if I could really see what was going on, which parts think that they're so connected, but they're so closed that there's no room to let any other new thought, idea, or practice in? Which part of my heart? And which part of my heart is so open and is receiving? And is it coming in the right channel? Or is it somehow, is there a hole somewhere there? Is it seeping out? Is it coming in one and letting out the other? It's a fascinating analogy to think about. If Shavuos is the time that God wants our hearts, and we understand that the PSSNA said that the renewal has to be the renewal of the heart, the renewal of the self, the renewal of who we are, then perhaps part of the avoda, part of the spiritual work that we're supposed to be doing is almost like a spiritual download. Which, by the way, makes total sense. I think we're almost out of time. Okay, we're out of time. Which, by the way, makes total sense that this is the culmination of the climbing of the spiritual ladder. Because at the end of it all, at the end of this climbing, at the end of this time period that we're supposed to be growing and growing and growing and growing, it's like, okay, you got here. Now let's analyze. Now let's see, are there certain ideals that stuck in, or are there certain ideals that stuck out? Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I just want to give one blessing for this. Yeah, go ahead.
When we're fragile and we're naked, we need to start over and be clothed again and start with the very basic. And what can we add? What can we, clothing? Is it warmth? Is it color? Where, what lessons do we take?
That's so beautiful. I don't even think you realize the depth in what you're saying, because when we left Egypt, no, even deeper, when we left Egypt, you know what, the way that we're described? You know the way that the Jewish people are described?
Just with what they have in their backs.
Naked. Naked. We were described as a naked people. And then from the climb from Exodus until Shavuos, we were then clothed. The Torah was that cloak. So we went from the place of being naked to becoming, so you're saying, and I understand what you're saying also, and so it's beautiful, beautiful analogy. I love that. So I just wanted to, I actually jotted down a little blessing over here. One of the beautiful blessings that we say in our prayer every day is V'sein chalkenu b'sorasecha. God, I want to be an active participant. I want to receive and have a part of your Torah. So I want to give ourselves a blessing that this Shavuos, this holiday of Shavuos, and especially now that we're culminating a season of Torah learning, it is a real Ziman Matan Toratenu, that it's not defined by a day and it's not defined by a certain hour, but it is a time of receiving the Torah, and that we recognize this not just as a commemoration, but as a real reliving, b'shana, every single year in a new way, in a new place, in a new space, and that we really should be able to be the real receivers of our special part of ourselves in this beautiful world of being able to be gifted this Torah. Amen. I'm going to stop the
Thank you.
recording over here. If anyone has any